Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. If you're wondering why there is a cut here, technical things happened in the interview, so this is the second part. But to piggyback from the first part of the interview, AutumnMei and I were just discussing her reaction to the feedback that she's gotten for her debut novel, Mystic Rising. And from what she's told me, the overwhelming reviews and reception have been positive thus far. So, AutumnMei, can you tell us more about what was your reaction to all the reception, all the praise you were getting for your debut novel?
Honestly, I was very overwhelmed. I was not expecting that much. I wasn't expecting so much positive feedback about my story. I get criticized for being too hard on myself, but I used to think um that I wasn't I wasn't a good of a writer, or my work didn't seem original. But to have a flood of people, from family to friends I've met online who don't really know me personally, just give me so much positive reception in my work that it blew away any doubt that I had for my writing and myself.
Absolutely. And I would imagine upon receiving all those praises and the reception from, the people that you've who purchased a copy or you've shared your work with, it must have validated your goals as an author and as a writer in the sense that you have been finally able to tell this story that's been with you for most of your whole life.
Yeah, I never I if I didn't have if I didn't have the people around me to push me to publish the story, I think Mystic Rising would have been a document in a flash drive for till the end of time.
Absolutely, and I know the feeling. I did not think my novel would also see, the light or transform from, a Word doc or Google Docs to something physical. So I completely understand. And now we actually turn to the first reflective question, which I'm eager to hear your thoughts on, Automate. So as I'm sure you and I both agree, being a creative individual, whether it's being an artist or an author, it's not a get rich quick scheme as people would like to imagine or believe. It's hard work, a lot of hours, sometimes years, crafting and honing our skills. And especially now in the digital age where, yes, everything is more accessible, especially for us authors to showcase our work, it's a double edged sword because our anxiety rises. We don't know if people are going to be open minded to the story that we are presenting or the style of writing that we are penning. And imposter syndrome comes pretty much to the forefront for all creators and all individuals, I believe, and really making us reconsider if this is something that we want to do. So, Anime, I'm curious, have you ever had those moments of, imposter syndrome or anxiety or self doubt? And if so, or if not, what disciplined you to get this story out there into the public, into the world, to show everyone who you are?
Hmm. Have I ever had imposter syndrome or had doubt with my work? All the time.
Mm.
Sometimes I didn't think I would be good. Sometimes once again I would doubt myself, and only to have people push me back to my feet and say, no, the story is good, and the story is something worth reading. What usually what gets me back on my feet, other than friends, but
You know,
it's Also wanting, it's also reminding myself why I picked up the book, why I decided to write in the first place, why I picked up the pen, why did I sat down with the keyboards, why did I get like laptops and tablets to continue writing the story. And I always think back of the younger version of me that would have loved a story like that would have loved a story like Mystic Rising.
Absolutely, 100%. And I love that mindset that you have. Like, why did I keep doing this? It's for this reason, and I absolutely adore it. Now we're gonna go into a set of questions, which I'm eager to hear your thoughts on, Automate, which is of course the business side of being an author. So from the beginning, and from what I've been able to find out, from what you've also told me in other conversations, Mystic Rising is a self-published novel. Now I'm wondering, was that the initial goal, or did you play with the idea of possibly getting Mystic Rising traditionally published or hybrid publishing?
Hmm. I I've always wanted Mystic Rising to be published, and up until maybe almost several years ago, I didn't know self-publishing was possible. I was looking I went into writing thinking traditional publishing was the only way to publish your
Mm-hmm.
story. So I was researching things like how to find an agent, what's a good publishing company to look into, how much it would cost, until I looked at the pros and cons and realized that the cons of traditional publishing was uh, have kind of teetered me away from it. And
Mm-hmm.
then when I learned about self-publish, one of the cons I didn't like was you did not have creative control over your work. So you could submit a
Yes.
story, and the traditional publishing company most I've heard of would they wouldn't meet your vision 100%. Like they would want the story to be rewritten, they'd want the cover to be redesigned. And the
Yes.
more I saw, and I grew up around the time when Hunger Games and Twilight were skyrocketing through the publishing industry, and it only
Mm-hmm.
seemed
Same.
like every book that came out after their popularity was a ripoff of the original. Like
Mm-hmm.
there was a dystopian version, there was a Twilight version, and then when I learned that publishing companies were seemed to be more interested in trends,
Yes.
and to the point where I learned that publishing companies will look at your book, but they won't publish it until there's something in my book that will become trendy enough for them to even try. And if the book doesn't succeed, then it doesn't, and then it gets put back in the shelf. So I did not that all of it did not sound appealing to me. So I decided to go for self-publishing. Saw that, yeah, I will have all the creative control over myself, but marketing it was pretty much my only con. But I didn't that didn't deter me enough to not go for self-publishing. Since I am also a visual artist, I thought to
Mm-hmm.
myself, I can always use my own artwork to advertise my story. I've seen enough book ads and videos, and watched enough on social media to know what to do, what not to do. So in a way, I sort of taught myself how to market myself as an author and as a writer and as an artist. It's gone through many trials and errors, or at least I'm still undergoing going through multiple trials and errors and seeing what works and what hasn't. So far, publishing speed drawings of the main characters do seem to work, but so far only seems to garner attention as an artist than a writer.
Absolutely. And you touch on a few things right there of how, when, yeah, Twilight and Hunger Games, I remember when those books came out. I remember, Hunger Games back in middle school back in '08, and that was like super popular. And then of course I read Hunger Games, or was forced to read Hunger Games in high school. But you're absolutely right. As soon as those books became popular, every author at the time wanted to grab a hold of the money train those books were creating. And like you said, publishers, when they realized these books had the same trends or the same clicks, they just took them in. And trends is, again, it's one of the things where it's a double-edged sword. Yes, trends could be good, but if you're writing solely for trends, your writing is going to fail, because you have to
Mm-hmm.
think of what trends are available, 2 years, 3 years, 5 or 10 years down the line. And yes, with self publishing, you do have creative control of your book, but marketing is the main con. I'm still struggling with marketing, but going forward, I think if I had to change anything, I think I would just have a better understanding of the self publishing industry. And also, to add to this, is what kind of author do you want to be? Do you just want to be an author who writes as a hobby, or are you a person that wants to try to make money and a business from this? Because those are two very different mindsets, which is something we will touch on later. But now I think it's time to focus on another aspect of the business side of being author, and that is the readership and the audience, because that is very important. Now, me and Anami, when we write our books, we are the target audience first and foremost, because we know the story better than anyone else. But when we share it and publish it, we have to consider, okay, who is exactly going to read this? What is my age group, my target audience, and genre? So, Anami, what would you say Mystic Rising's target audience and readership is? I know you said it is a young adult story, but is it those one young adult stories where it's almost like in the middle, where adults can read it, understand it, as well as the young adults can read it and understand it?
I think the youngest target audience is the same age as the main character, so 14 and 15. But also, it can also be something people like. It can also be something adults can read. I still know adults who still reads YA, so I didn't. So I there aren't too many there there aren't too many. Oh my goodness. I wrote Mystic Rising with the idea that the target audience would be roughly around 14 or 15 years old,
Right.
similar to the same age as the main character. But I'm also open to the book is also open to readers that are much older than that, much older than 15 and 14.
Right.
There it, the book is not graphic, or at least I don't think it is, or the book is not too it's not too heavily matured where it seems where it needs adult supervision to look through it before they let someone younger read it. But it
Okay.
doesn't treat its but it doesn't treat its younger audience like it has to hold their hand all the time. it takes
Ah.
it takes readers of all ages throughout the journey of the main character.
Okay, I like that. I guess so. Pretty much, it doesn't have a lot of used an industry term, a lot of spice, or maybe no spice at all. But it doesn't like play down its readers. It understands who the reader is and trusts them, which is not an easy thing to do. I am still trying to work on that with my own stories. Now, going to the audience, do you have a good idea of who your audience is? And in your opinion, when should an author consider their audience for their book?
Perhaps because I expanded my age range from 14 to up. I'm I don't quite know. I don't I do not have a solid idea on who specifically the book is for, as it seems to garner the attention of audiences of all ages, which was the goal anyway. So
All right.
there's no specific age on what the there's no specific target audience or target audience for Mystic Rising. It seems to be appealing to both to adult readers and young adult readers.
Nice. I like
I
that. I like that.
I would I will admit, as the writer myself, I am strongly against having readers be as like 10 years old or younger from reading it, just because there's no graphic or spice scenes, but the story does carry an aspect of horror.
All
I'll
right.
go into more detail with that if we do get to that part.
All right. Perfect. Perfect. And we actually may be getting to that because the next question, is something that ties back to almost the beginning in part one, which is, the making of this book, how, you are very intrigued and fascinated by fantasy, mythology, and anime, and also mentioning some of the popular animes who have influenced you. And, I'm wondering, as an author, how did you sort of balance it out? Because it's not an easy thing to do. And what I mean by that is, when we publish our stories, we're always inspired by, stuff from our childhood, whether it's movies, books, comics, TV shows, whatever. But at the end of the day, it's our own work, it's our own voice that our readers are going to uh, listen and understand through the characters. And that's not an easy thing to do, to balance it out and to showcase that. So I'm wondering, AutumnMei, for you, how have you been able to balance it out where, yes, you're showing, the stories, TV shows, and characters that have played a huge role in inspiring you to create the realm of Mystic Rising. But at the end of the day, you're showcasing your voice as the author. You're not trying to be like anyone else. You're trying to be you.
That I believe that was a process. That was a process that took so many years to work. It took so many years to work through. How I found my author voice is actually it's funny that you brought up the if you it's funny that you did bring up the it's funny how you bring up how I had to filter out my voice from the voices of all of like other inspirations, because that's how I was able to write Mystic Rising. By when I designed the main character, I thought about how she would speak, how she would behave, like um and I wrote the story with the idea of she's the one that's telling the story. She's the one that's telling the story, not me, because not me, where she has a different where
Mm.
she has a different pitch, she has a different style. I used to take acting courses when I was younger, taking the role of a certain character was not difficult for me to adjust to.
All right. All right.
What
And
may I
oh,
ask?
go ahead.
Sorry, may I ask, like, the question was about balancing like all the inspirations in one, juggling all at once.
Hmm.
Oh, that's I can answer that one. May I answer that one as well?
Of course.
I when I was the first thing I did as an author, not the first thing, but throughout the time of writing Mystic Rising, I went through a I did a lot of research on the shows that I like, the anime and the mythology, and I always noticed that there was something common with every story, that all seem to connect regardless of the medium or genre, like the hero's journey. That is a
Hmm.
tale. That is a tale as literally old as time, and it can be
Yes.
said. Yeah, and they can, and you can have the hero's journey be shown in anime, in mythical stories, or in horror movies. It is everywhere. And then there are certain tropes, there are certain plot points where it's the same thing whether it's in literature or in anime. It just has a different name. Like there, I forgot what it was, but I forgot what it was. But I know anime uses the trope of the power of friendship, and
Yes.
there's so many stories that isn't anime that relies, or they either relies on, or its major theme is the power of the support from friendship.
Mm-hmm. It's true. It's absolutely true. There's a lot of stories, and even in like, a case in point, Harry Potter, you can make an argument that that whole uh story, one of the main points is, Harry has his friends who are by his side,
Mm-hmm.
every day. There's another one you could say, Lord of the Rings has that talk of fellowship. I mean, the first book is called The Fellowship of the Ring, and it's about, among many things, these different characters coming together to form a bond and surviving. It is really fascinating, and you're absolutely right that we see these in other media trying to balance it out. And also, automate as a maybe a little tangent, but one I think is important. um what are sort of like, your thoughts on, authors being pigeonholed in one genre or one style of writing? And the reason why I'm bringing that up is, I'm sure you probably have seen books or even movies that have had the tagline "so and so meets so and so." From a reader's perspective, that's engaging. From the author's point of view, it's not, because it pigeonholes them into one style of writing or one type of writing. And for us authors, we want to be fluid. We want to be cross genre. So I was wondering if you can provide your own thoughts on that as well, and maybe also tied into your background as an artist too.
From an author, well, actually, from an author and a reader, I pardon my language, but I call BS on trying to pigeonhole any creative person into a little box.
Hmm.
Because most of the time, when you hear books or shows that says so and so meets so and so, the only thing they have in common is just the surface. It
Yes.
barely scratches the surface of what it's trying to compare itself to. And I don't like the idea that that anyone has to limit themselves on. They have to stick to certain genres. Someone, I don't know who said, I don't know who told who I don't know who quoted this, but they said, "What is horror but comedy without a punchline?"
Ooh, I've heard of that, but I don't know who said it.
I don't know who said it, but it sticks to me it sticks to me because it sticks to me because it is one of the reasons why I do not limit myself with just one genre. Like if I want to write a YA fantasy, I'm not going to stick to anything that's to this little box that says these are the checkpoints of a this is a checkpoint of a young adult fantasy. Fill the checks out. I say no, I'm doing whatever I want. And this is also the inspiration came from all of the not anime not anime, but some of the western cartoons I also grew up with that had a
Yes.
similar premise of supernatural creatures and living in the modern world, where if you think about it, it's one of those unfortunate implications where if you or called fridge horror in TV tropes, where it seems goofy and silly at the surface, but when you really think hard on it, there's a horrifying implication beneath it.
Right.
So it's some it's so like it's something that is like something that can be presented as one genre, but if you nudge it just a little bit further, it is no different than the next genre.
No, that is absolutely true. And that kind of leads into the next question a little bit. And going back to also what we were talking about, trends and tropes, this leads to probably one of my favorite questions of the interview, AutumnMei. So brace yourself. This has a lot of weight to it. So I've been doing podcasts now for almost 5 years. 3 years on Anchor, 2 years on YouTube, now three coming this December. And in that time, I've had the opportunity to meet a wide range of authors from traditional, indie, and hybrid, from different stages, from different walks of life, at different points in their lives, whether they're just starting out, whether they are in the middle, or they're writing their next book, whatever. And ultimately, I've come to the conclusion that there are two roads for authors: to be an author and to be known as an author. To be an author is an individual dedicated to storytelling, not motivated by capital. But let's be honest, as indie authors, it's nice to get a little money here and there. To be known as an author is an individual dedicated to marketing, showcasing their work on every platform, interviews such as this, going on social media, promoting the heck out of it. And both roads have their own trials and hurdles, but I definitely feel, and a lot of my guests believe the same thing, for first time authors getting into this industry, the second path is the most enticing, because that is the ultimate goal. But that leads again to what we talked about, trends and tropes in writing, and whether publishers are actually going to take your book into consideration if it is marketable solely on the themes and the tropes. And what I've learned from all of my guests is this: in this industry, there is no guarantee your first book is going to give you the satisfaction or the gratification you are looking for, but there is exceptions to that. There are authors who I've interviewed that skyrocketed from their first novel alone, that allowed them to then work on other stories. And that's a huge thing to do, and a very rare thing to do, and I might add. But generally speaking, you have sort of this roller coaster of highs and lows, which can deter a person from ever pursuing their craft or honing their craft even more, to where they're not writing because they're passionate about it, they're writing to write. One of my previous guests said, when your muse becomes your job, it's going to die out. So, Autumnmei, what are your thoughts on this really important discussion that, you know, there is truth to it? For first time authors, there's no guarantee their first book is going to give them the gratification they are looking for, but it should not deter them from writing more stories if being an author is something they're truly passionate about.
I've spent a number of years coming to terms that my first book was either going to be it was either going to skyrocket to it was either going to skyrocket to success, or plummet down, or fluctuate between highs and lows. I think I kind of came to terms to that because all of that anxiety, and then all of that anxiety and worrying and depression that came with the 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 implication, like the concept of even failing, or becoming, or either failing or succeeding, ultimately led to one of the worst things that could possibly happen to any sort of creative person, and that's
Mm-hmm.
the work never being done, because
Right.
you're stuck in this stasis, you're stuck stagnating on thinking of possibilities that may never happen unless you take that initial leap. So at the end of the day, it's not a, at the end of the day, I don't think the focus should be, is the story going to be successful, or is it going to plummet? Is it going to kind of be that little mid between, where it's like it's not completely failing, but it's not succeeding either? It's
Right.
just get the work, get the story, just get the story out. like do get the story out, get the tears out the way, get the sadness out of the way. uh yeah, because it is a hard competitive field out there, and you can't put all of your eggs in one basket. The best thing you could do is just be is hope for the better and be prepared for the worst.
You are absolutely right, Autumn, and a lot of my guests, say the exact same thing. And to add on to that, something you say on the show a few times is what you know grit trumps talent, but I've changed it to where it's that grit becomes talent. Because as authors, we only get better as time goes on. And it may be your fifth, 10th, 15th, or 20th book that really gets your name out there to the masses. Case in point, I had one author on the show last year, Natalie Wright, author of Season of the Dragon. She told me that that book was her seventh book that she's most known for, even though she's written six books before that. They were all good, but Season of the Dragon is the one that really stands out. It's the one that's marketed all the time. And I think that's also another pill to swallow is that, yes, it's not your first book, but it's still one of your books that you put a lot of hard work into it and it's getting the praise it deserves. Because then you can say, hey, if you enjoyed this book, check out my other ones to see me grow as an author. And speaking of growth, one thing I think is important to touch on is, especially for indie authors, networking and collaborating with other authors, especially on social media. Instagram alone, I have met a majority of people on that platform, all of whom, or at least the ones who I've interacted with, have all been featured on this channel and in this series. So, AutumnMei, are there any authors or individuals you would like to give a personal shout out to who have helped you understand the industry a little bit better? And you can even talk about, individuals who have helped you with your background as an artist too.
I Yeah, I'd like to give a bit of a shout out to a few of my artist friends. They helped me with drawing. They were also they helped me improve as an artist, and at the same time gave me feedback on the story, ideas and suggestions, and criticism. So a handful of them are also indie artists themselves. One is Miso for Art. The other is I'm going by, I know their real names, but I'm going by their artist names. One
All
is
right.
Miso for Art. He draws 90s style anime. He draws on 90s styles art anime.
Ooh,
There's the 13th Hanger where he draws mecha anime, and they are very detailed. He had also drawn a lot of my characters.
nice.
He was one of my first beta readers that read the story through, and he would draw. He had, there was a character that he liked, and he drew them a lot. The other is Bowl of Wonder. I would speak to her a lot when it came to ideas, and she would give me suggestions and she would give me comments and suggestions of where the story could go, or like how the character should react in certain scenes. And the other artist is Just Josh Draws. His art style mainly focused on comic book styles, but he's been experimenting with anime style as of late.
Nice, nice. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think I know Just Raw Straws. I think I've also followed him on social media as well. And that's the thing I love about, the independent community is that we're all in the same uh field together, or not field, but we're all in the same position. We're all trying to get our names out there. And sometimes, networking and collaborating is a way to go, because most people will argue that, in the the publishing industry and maybe also in the artist world, there is a lot of cutthroats, and maybe there is some truth to that. But generally speaking, we all want to help one another and be there for each other's successes and help each other when we fall down. And I have been very fortunate to meet a lot of individuals who have helped me understand the industry a little bit better. And AutumnMei, going back to this question again, are there any authors you would like to give a mention to who have helped you understand the industry a little bit better?
I actually I would like to credit for I don't remember his Discord name, but his he published a book. So his name is out there. He goes by David Grinnell. We met each other in college, and he was also into writing as well. He introduced me to in fact I my biggest thanks goes to him because he introduced me to the Curious Corvid community. And
Ah,
yeah, he was also publishing a novel at the time, and he also gave me feedback, and I provided feedback for his work as well. We would meet up and talk to each other. And because I became part of the Curious Corvid community, I got to meet a lot of other wonderful authors and writers as well. And and then somehow I wound up being part of the Tales of the Wandering Scribe. I
that
forgot
is.
how, but I know one thing led to another.
But yeah, it is, true. And for those who don't know, the Curious Corvid is, of course, run by Raven White, who has been on the show before in my first year. She's an amazing individual. She is the owner of her own publishing house, Curious Corvid Publishing, and the author of The Sentimental Dead. And as Ami also said, I also have my own server as well. So it is an incredible place. I've also met a lot of people on Curious Corvid as well. I'm also part of that. And I just love interacting with other authors and knowing, just what has worked for them. How can I Im- input it into my own arsenal as an author? And also just meeting and just interacting with new people, because I am so blown away by the amount of talent in the independent community and what we have accomplished. Going back to what you mentioned earlier, Anime, was that the self-publishing and being, an independent creator was something that was, entirely new at the time. And most people have the conception that if you're independent, your work is not professional, like traditional publishing or being a traditional artist with some form of education to back it. But nowadays, you can't even tell the difference between an indie author or a traditionally published author, because the industry has changed so much. And I think on that, as we go into this final question, which I will ask you, Anime. So, with everything that we've talked about, from what you have mentioned and your journey thus far with the debut of Mystic Rising, what is your word of wisdom to other individuals who've had a story in their head and they want to get it out there to the world? What is your advice to them?
My advice would be to persevere through the odds because no one else is going to tell your story but you. And if anyone doubts you, or if anyone says you're not going to go far, you're not going to make it, or what you're aspiring to do isn't going to work. What worked for me was ask them about what's the alternative? What are they doing? who are they to criticize you? Have they written a story? Do they know anything about writing and publishing? And until they come up with a solid answer, even if they come up with a solid answer, then so what? If you still want to write, then write.
Absolutely 100% a perfect ending to this amazing interview and the end of the November lineup for Tales of the Wandering Scribe. I want to give a huge thank you to AutumnMei for coming on the show, making her official debut here on the channel, and telling us all about her story and her journey thus far. Now, AutumnMei, where can people find you on social media to interact, and where can people buy a copy of Mystic Rising?
You can purchase a copy off of Amazon as a paperback or a Kindle ebook. And I have two social media handles at the moment. They're both Instagram. One is AutumnMei Arts, which is where I usually post my artwork. So you'll see sketches of certain characters or scene and even craft work. And the second handle is called Author of Mystic Rising, which is primarily focused on Mystic Rising because I I had to separate my art page from my writing page. But in the
Nice.
Author of Mystic Rising, you'll get updates on any shows that any book or art shows I'm participating in where I am selling physical copies of Mystic Rising. You'll see character designs and some random artwork, as well as photos, as well as various pictures of my of my usual routine, like my workshop, my any updates on the story, like snippets of dialogue or descriptions or scenery. And you'll occasionally see my co-editor, my cat, participating in it.
Awesome. Awesome. I will link all those down below in the description of this video. Thank you everyone for joining me for all the episodes in November. And as a little update, I am taking a break for the last week of November as I will be gone on Thanksgiving. But I will be coming back the first week of December with new guests, new authors, new historians. I am so excited to share with you all the things I have planned, as well as a very special episode, which I am finalizing in the works. Again, a huge thank you to AutumnMei for coming on the show, making her official debut. And this won't be the last time we see her. Who knows? She may have a sequel in the works, a different story, or maybe a novella set in the world of Mystic Rising. You just have to stay up to date with her social media to know what she has. And when that day comes, she will be here on the show. But until then, this is the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill asking you to like, comment, and subscribe down below. And comment which episode was your favorite for the month of November. And until next time, this is the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill signing out, wishing you all a wonderful evening.